We all know that Christmas can be a bit of a harrowing time, whether you're together with family, you're missing your loved ones that have passed, or especially if you are all on your own, and maybe you try to temper those challenges and that sadness with sugar cookies or eggnog or by watching classic Christmas movies. And there is a classic Christmas movie about being alone and wanting to reconnect with family, and of course that movie is the classic Die Hard. All right, I want to settle this once and for all. Die Hard is not just a Christmas movie. It is a fantastic Christmas movie, perhaps one of the greatest Christmas movies of all time. First off, let's get the obvious out of the way. It is set on Christmas Eve. The through line is John wanting to reconnect with his estranged wife, aptly named Holly, and this guy, Hollis, is trying to steal her away from him, who's blowing snow early on, wintry themes. And don't we all want to spend Christmas relaxing by a fire, even if it is Nakatomi Plaza that's burning? At least we get to kick off the New Year's with a bang, right? So either way, like John McClane, I want to tell you all, welcome to the party, pal, and let's get to the true meaning of Christmas movies. So here's some images of classic holiday favorites. You've got your White Christmas, the musical sequel to Holiday Inn, Hey, Let's Save the Story and Sing Some Songs, A Little Miracle on 34th Street, and what is often considered the peak of Christmas films, your It's a Wonderful Life. And in that classic, you've got George Bailey, who represents this everyman, our Mr. Smith, before not yet gone to Washington, right? He faces the questions of death and not existence, which are pretty deep stuff for Christmas, right? But we also often ponder these things at the end of the year. Interestingly, all of them struggle with the nature of capitalism and greed in different ways in those movies. And in that same vein, we have kids' classics like How the Grinch Stole Christmas or A Charlie Brown Christmas, where the people, or the who's, have to look past all that glitters to rediscover the true meaning of the holiday amidst the challenge of loss and hardship and even a massive theft. And then we have Rudolph, where Hermie, his friend, and a whole aisle of misfit toys become these unlikely heroes they were previously mocked, who now save the day. You know what? You're right, that doesn't sound at all like the themes present in Die Hard. But let's be clear, there are certain elements you need to make it a classic Christmas movie. It can't just be a tiny touch of a Christmas moment in the film that takes place over the whole year, like a Mean Girls. There can't just be a winter throughout, or outfits like in Frozen, which just seems to happen at the time. And while not every Christmas movie contains all these parts and the element and its key moments in the plot, but I want to break it down. They should have most of them as keys. So thinking about music, you got memorable tunes to sort of classic Christmas songs. You got your Holly Jolly Christmas and Rudolph. You got You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch. You've got your Hark the Herald Angels Sing and whatnot in It's a Wonderful Life. Also in Charlie Brown, same song. It also makes you want to sing along to those kinds of tunes, right? These are old movies, so they're obviously rife with nostalgia. Of course, we see it throughout them, but it's often about hearkening back to a simpler time, away from the hustle and bustle that so often accompanies this holiday. As for community, well, Christmas is about coming together, and the best movies have a family or a community reconnecting, maybe to come and sing a little da-oo-do, race around a tree, or rescue a much sadder little tree, or maybe save the savings in loan, right? Romance, a lot of people, whether they're happily connected or on their own, they want to reimagine romance in this holiday. Yes, that's every cheesy Hallmark or Netflix movie, or the problematic Love Actually, all the way back to White Christmas. Even in ones that don't seem immediately about romance, you've got Doris Walker in 34th Street. She is this archetype of the woman now in this modern era who is too busy forging her way until this kindly lawyer, Fred Gailey, comes along and saves Santa and maybe her heart. And then, of course, there's the tales of redemption. Good Christmas movies always have this redemption arc. It means bad things can and will happen, whether that's losing your business, all of your presents, losing your belief in Santa and the holiday itself. And many of these better Christmas movies tend to have a moral in it that often relates to getting away from all the greed of our society to find the generosity and kindness should win out. We see those same elements in more recent classics. You got Buddy the Elf singing, right? Despite his cruel father, oh baby, it's cold outside. You've got Ralphie amidst a wave of Christmas story nostalgia. He longs for his Red Ryder BB gun, despite all the violence, the bullies, the frozen tongues on poles. Clark Griswold, right? So many issues with his family, and also Christmas lights amidst his Christmas vacation. But that family is also the community that comes together to help him amidst his money woes and traumas, even if it involves kidnapping his boss, maybe something George Bailey and his friends should have considered. And even amidst the body count of gremlins, there is a love story at its heart, and a return and a longing to move away from freaky modern inventions to simpler times. Scott Calvin falls victim to the Santa Claus, as the previous Santa starts the movie falling off a roof and dying. But Scott gains a newfound outlook on life and about 150 pounds. And then you got Home Alone, the tale of this underwhelming boy battling against greedy robbers who try to take from him like the Grinch. We got death, we've got guns, we've got kidnapping, we've got theft, all in some Christmas movies. Maybe that means that Christmas films aren't so easily and casually to find. And do not neglect also that a key element of having a happy story is having that happy ending in a Christmas movie. Whatever hardships our protagonists face throughout, they should mostly be resolved in some manner in the final act, whether that's through a shiny nose leading the way or an angel getting their wings.
Get me back! I don't care what happens to me! Get me back to my wife and kids! Help me, Clarence, please! Please! I want to live again! I want to live again! I want to live again! Please, God, let me live again.
And we got George Bailey. Classic. The bridge he was going to jump off of. And yet, now he wants to live again. Right?
George!
In the cold as the snow falls.
Hey, what's the matter?
And
Get out of here, Bert. I'll hit you again. Get out of here. What
a
the
cop
damn
comes
are
up.
you yelling for, George?
A cop to rescue George in this regard.
Bert, do you know me?
But yet he still has this inclination of violence and fighting him,
Looking all over town trying to
like
find
he was
you.
doing
I
earlier.
saw your car piled into that tree down there, and I thought maybe
But
you-
he's restored.
maybe your mouth's bleeding.
He's
You
happy,
all
his
right?
lip is bloody. He goes running through, shouting, reuniting with his family, with his kids. So let's ponder for a moment that original Christmas story, and no, I don't mean that of Jesus at the manger and his birth. Though, honestly, John McClane was an outcast for whom there was no room in the tower. But what I really mean is Dickens' A Christmas Carol. It was famously originally filmed, well, I say originally in 1938, though there were silent movies in like 1901 and I want to say 1908, 1907. You're probably really familiar with the story and many of the more recent remakes, even if you haven't seen those. And it is a movie that is rife with themes of greed and death and trauma and sadness and cruelty and ultimately redemption. That there's always a chance to change and embrace the spirit of generosity and kindness and compassion up until the moment that death's hand is gripping your shoulder, right? So maybe now your mind is a little bit open to the concept that Christmas movies aren't just this sort of schmaltzy, meaningless fare, the sort of shiny tinsel of Tinseltown. But if you're still a bit skeptical about Die Hard, let's take a look at the original trailer just to refresh ourselves. This is how it was marketed in 1988.
It's Christmas Eve in L.A. California.
Is Daddy coming home soon? Well, we'll see what Santa and Mommy can do, okay?
What do we notice? Christmas music throughout, mentions of Santa, a wife and daughter, and wanting to draw close and hopefully seeing each other. Yes, quippy one-liners. Yes, theft and greed and guns and violence and explosions and cursing, and also incompetent cops. But there's also a man on his own who's desperate to save himself and those he cares about.
Come out to the coast, we'll get together, have a few laughs.
It is a story that takes place on Christmas Eve into Christmas Day, but in a place that does seem unfamiliar with the sort of Christmas aesthetic that we're often used to. It is a modern office building in LA. That is a juxtaposition, and it is a strange one for John, too. We are seeing it through his eyes as someone longing for something more traditional, and that and his relationship with Holly are the beginning of the tension, right? Star Wars had a holiday special that took place in space. It's a Wonderful Life. It spans years, let alone a single holiday season, and is set in locations from banks to dangling off a bridge. I mean, Christmas is almost more central in the plot of Die Hard than that movie. Without Christmas, there is no party. John does not travel to LA without Christmas, and the terrorists don't have all the opportunities that they have. You know, traffic is light due to everyone leaving for the holidays. The authorities are lax. Presents and wrapping are key plot elements, and the Christmas imagery throughout, yes, maybe it's jarring amidst the violence, but this is meant to be so. Just like when we hear stories of people fighting over Tickle Me Elmos or getting in arguments at white elephant parties, we're being shown that the violence and the greed is inherent in at least American Christmas culture, and it's the very thing that we and John need to root out. As for holiday quotes, there are references to Santa and the night before Christmas. There's talk of parties and family and music and Christmas miracles. And amidst this sunny California background in a modern tower, we're reminded not to have blind spots about how Christmas may be celebrated differently around the world. Don't have such a Eurocentric view because, hey, in the Southern Hemisphere, Christmas takes place during the summer. And John says at a point, "You throw quite a party. I didn't realize they celebrated Christmas in Japan." And to which there is a quippy response about, hey, you misjudge what our intentions always were. Of course we celebrate Christmas there, right? So let's think about Christmas movie elements and how Die Hard meets them in key ways. We've got the moral. The bad guys are trying to steal $640 million in bearer bonds. I mean, that's pretty anti-Christmas spirit with all that greed. Their ruthlessness leads to their ultimate violent ends, right? The cost of that greed. Then we have the sort of everyman, our John McClane, our George Bailey reimagined as a 1980s New York cop who can make a real difference now. The agents and the news crews outside, by comparison, seem rude and incompetent. John is just a regular cop caught in these extraordinary circumstances. He embodies resourcefulness, resilience. He shows us that anyone can rise to the occasion when necessary. As for community and family, there is that community connection between John and Al, the local cop. There's a surprising bond between them that develops, right? And also throughout, John wants to spend time with his children. He brings his teddy bear. He's working hard to win back his estranged life. It is about family reconnection, even amidst all the chaos. And romance. That is what this story is, ultimately, in the midst of explosions. We start with an independent woman, that trope, successful in her career. She leaves her old town, her old relationship behind. She is one of the early forays of that now infamous Hallmark trope. And then at the end, there is this rekindled love between John and Holly, making it a true holiday romance. There's the moment they reconnect early on in the movie, and the only complications present are those of, a regular long marriage, discussing where John might sleep that night, juxtaposed against people at the time trying to casually hook up at the party. And then there's the elitist Hollis, who is trying to date Holly, as opposed to the plain and simple John. He gives Holly a Rolex watch as a company, right? But John is more simple and plain. He's not just fighting terrorists, he's fighting for his marriage, and he also wants to move back to a simpler time, that wistfulness, right? As opposed to his simple gifts that he gives. You juxtapose all of that with John's LA cop buddy Al, who buys snack cakes for his pregnant wife at a convenience store for her gift, compared to the Rolex Hollis is buying, simple exchanges. And throughout the entire series, you've got John always longing for simpler times. He hates modern technology. He wants a simpler Christmas without all the fanciness. He sets the champagne aside very early on. In fact, when he's first getting into the building, he struggles and is annoyed at the digital entry system that's required. We see the 80s through his lens, with Christmas in Los Angeles adding that sort of layer of complexity in a modern time, right? This movie that is shot like a 65 millimeter classic Western. We've got moments of redemption throughout. We see it in Argyle, right? The partying limo driver who stops partying in the limo long enough to be serious and take out the getaway car. Al, who was called a desk jockey cop after the horrific error of killing a child, which should not be minimized, he learns to draw his weapon again to protect John and Holly. That's his redemption arc. Holly, who, unlike the Hallmark trope, she doesn't go to the small town again, which was New York City. She stays the high-powered businesswoman, and John moves to meet her where she is. But she does soften and change and decides to go by McLean now instead of her maiden name, Gennaro, yet still being tough enough to punch out the reporter who is threatening her family. And not only does McLean Sark, he tries to repair his relationship with his family, but he's got to overcome his own personal fears and doubts and prove that he is still a good man. There's a point at which he sits in a bathroom, his feet are bleeding, his heart is bruised in the face of possibly losing his life, like Scrooge faced, and he's also facing losing his wife. He says to Al, "Tell Holly she's the best thing that ever happened to a bum like me." He's also realizing his fault in everything, and he's realizing also at that moment he talks about how he said "I love you" many times, but he never said "I'm sorry," and that's the thing he wants more than anything to do now. It's a pretty classic Christmas theme of reconciliation and second chances, and he goes from estranged husband to action hero, saving the day, possibly saving his marriage. That's real character development that puts, some holiday heroes to shame. Oh, and let's not forget music. No, it isn't a big musical like Meet Me in St. Louis, but Christmas music is purposeful throughout, from Let It Snow to Winter Wonderland. The soundtrack is full of a bunch of festive tunes that shout Christmas. And even if those tunes are sometimes ironically juxtaposed against machine gun fire, this is a new look at Christmas. In fact, there was what I consider a now classic Christmas track that came out just some months before this movie, and a bit premieres in it. Let's see if you can recognize that tune.
Like I said, you're very fast, Argyle. Ready for some tunes? Hey, that'll work. Is there any Christmas music? Yeah, Christmas music.
You see that amidst that, John, his nostalgic self, he isn't a fan of the song. But the inside joke is that Run DMC's Christmas in Hollis does for music what Die Hard does for movies. It sort of takes some traditional elements and it infuses it with a modern sensibility. It also kind of flips it on its head, right? You got John from New York City, you got Argyle, you got Officer Al. They are not the Ebenezers in the fancy suits like some of our terrorists. They are the Cratchits, right? They are the down-to-earth folks who celebrate a city Christmas, how they like, without pretense, without glamour. They are playing at fanciness for a moment, with Argyle saying he's never driven a limo before, and John is in his for the first time. And Both the song and the movie, though, despite all of that festivity, are at their heart about family. And let's not forget a happy ending. John saves the day. He gets the girl. He leaves the terrorists on the naughty list, as it were, with a bearded man flying through the sky. And to all a good night. You can't really get a much more satisfying holiday resolution to that, right? After he is reunited with Holly, the snow begins to miraculously fall in LA, even, of all places. Christmas still comes. Oh, how is that for, like, real Christmas spirit? But, okay, I hear you. There might be still some reasons it shouldn't be a Christmas movie, right? Right? Okay, let's be real. Yes, there's a lot of violence, but that makes for a heck of a fun movie. But violence and death aren't anything new to Christmas movies. It's really more about levels. You got Cornelius in Rudolph battling with an abominable snowman. You got George Bailey getting into fights with cops and bloodying his lip. You got John now showing us that in modern America, sometimes even the brightest moments that we have in our lives won't allow us to escape violence in this current state we're in. And also, sometimes we have to fight for justice and family and our very marriages, right? But action movies can't be Christmas movies, really, because I think there's a lot of action in A Christmas Carol and in Home Alone, and there's a lot of language and dark humor in Christmas Vacation. And you know what? I get it. Not all Christmas movies are meant for our youngest viewers, but sometimes the more adult ones tell some more meaningful stories. All right, let's hit some rapid fire ones for all of you naysayers still. Release date. Yeah, it came out in July. Yeah, because summer movies are when movies make the most money. Chill your Eurocentric-ish view about, when Christmas is or what it looks like. Again, consider the whole world, and LA is a representation of that. But what other movie came out in the summer? Maybe A Miracle on 34th Street came out in May. But meanwhile, now Die Hard frequently plays on Christmas Eve, prior even to the streaming era when people choose when it plays all on their own. But it is rated R. That's not very family friendly. Honestly, nowadays it probably might be rated PG-13. Many of the later Die Hard sequels were. But there are other R-rated Christmas movies. There are violent ones like The Night Before. There are raunchy ones like Bad Santa. Oh, and there was also, what was that one? Oh, Love Actually is an R-rated Christmas film, right? Even though maybe the movie isn't explicitly about the story of Christmas, it is at least implicitly about it, right? John references his faith in the man upstairs when he's at his direst limit. You're like, where is Santa? Yes, there are images of Santa that appear throughout in hats, but in one sense you can argue that John himself is our Santa in this scenario. He does not deliver gifts, but he delivers justice. He does not ride a sleigh, but he rides through elevator shafts. But the spirit of Christmas is embodied in him, keeping that family connected and together. So, cool. You've heard from me and my thoughts on it. What do people of more important status say about it? Well, it is listed as a Christmas movie by a range of critics, film historians, and a lot of notable cinema sites, your IMDBs and whatnots. There are actors across the industry that mostly agree that it is a Christmas film. The original screenwriters, creators of the film, D'Souza and Stewart, D'Souza, amongst them, said that this script wove Christmas into the narrative purposefully because without it, the setup doesn't work. But let's listen to what some other folks have to say.
Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Hey, don't you have any Christmas music? This is Christmas music.
It's 1000% Christmas movie.
Interesting. What about a Hollywood historian?
Let's get to the real reason I had you here, which is just the definitive proof. You have settled the argument. Die Hard is in this. It gets its own chapter. Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
I get it. There will be some detractors even still, maybe even some notable ones. Bruce Willis said it was not a Christmas film.
Now, please listen very carefully. Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. It's a goddamn Bruce Willis movie. So yippee-ki-yay to all of you motherfuckers.
Granted, it was in the midst of a roast on an evening filled with jokes, so maybe he was playing around. But he did play a key character. But he didn't make the movie. The director, John McTiernan, knew it was the magical story of John McClane, the everyman so often rejected, scratching his truth into the cement about his place in the world, and ultimately telling what would be a Christmas story.
And Steve D'Souza, the writer, completely got it. He understood. And Jack DeGovia, the designer, understood. And Bruce came to understand in his way. And Jan de Bont completely got it. And in fact, everybody, as they came to work on the movie, began to get, as I said, this idea of this movie's an escapee. And there was a joy in it. Because we were, all the scratchers on the side of the king's tomb, and we had changed the content. And that is how Die Hard became it. We hadn't intended it to be a Christmas movie, but the joy that came from it is what turned it into a Christmas movie.
And so, I think kind of that's what John's story teaches us, right? It doesn't matter what any of them say, what the elite and powerful decide. The scheming thieves can't intellectualize all they want. The scheming thieves can intellectualize all that they want, while we sort of crawl through the difficult ductwork of our daily grind lives. It really doesn't matter what I think, not even really what the actors or creators think anymore, because this is a story that doesn't belong to them. It now belongs to the people, and we, the people, decide. And to that end, even as recently as 2016, a little early streaming era, 1.3 million Americans watched Die Hard on Christmas Eve. That beat out a lot of other traditional holiday favorites like Your Home Alone, Your Miracle on 34th Street, Your Santa's Clauses. The people want a story of a scrappy New York City cop winning against all odds for Christmas, right? So I think it's pretty definitive. Die Hard is a Christmas movie, whether snobs and purists want to deny that. But it's a great Christmas movie. Let's be clear. There are a lot of terrible, trashy Christmas movies, from all the cheesy formulaic offerings on certain networks to your flops like Jingle All the Way. There are bad horror movies like Black Christmas. There are money grabs like Home Alone 3, Santa Claus 3. Yes, they made those. It's amazing that anything in the last 40 years has been good enough to even stand out in some way. And there are also lovely Christmas movies that I think are heartwarming, like The Holdovers, Almost Christmas. There are festive films like Jingle Jangle, Spirited. I really enjoy quirky ones like Noel. But all of these are too recent to be considered in the same conversation as some of the classics that have stood the test of time. Anything less than 10 years old can't be in consideration for the greatest, at least not yet anyway, so we're gonna shoo those aside. Now, I also realize that there are great Christmas movies that are a little niche, are not known by a lot of people. Emmett Otter's Jug Band Christmas, the best Christmas pageant ever, which was a made-for-TV movie. Loved them as a child, adored it. There's Poignant Silent Night or the family drama of This Christmas. Touching films, but they do not have the reach to be considered amongst the greatest. So we have to set those aside too. Then there are the sequels of hits, like, yes, I know Die Hard has sequels. Home Alone, the original, amazing. Classic. Second one, decent, but not as good. There are Christmas movies that are remakes of old stories. There are some of those remakes that are strong contenders in their own rights. Your Scrooged, your Muppet Christmas Carol, which that one even adds music and chickens to all the other elements of the Christmas classic. But they aren't entirely fresh or unique stories. Not that, yes, I know Christmas is a time for rewatching and remembering, and even modern remakes like The Preacher's Wife, which I think surpassed the original, are great. So, being these remakes aren't a major mark against them, right? We love that flashback and that nostalgia, but I think it does at least dilute their consideration somewhat, but for the original versions, right? So let's look at the numbers. Critics laud Die Hard. Even the stodgy paper of record New York Times, in the year that it came out, said, you know what, we gotta admit, the strange thing is, it works. Got a 5 out of 5. Die Hard is rated 94% favorably by critics, 94% favorably by audiences. Also, there are only 2 Christmas movies in the history of film that are rated higher in both metrics. One of those is the classic It's a Wonderful Life, which gets 94% from critics, 95% from audiences by comparison, which is pretty close. I mean, I would argue that Die Hard is more focused on Christmas events than that film. Die Hard is ranked number 2 Christmas movie of all time on IMDB. It's ranked in the top 20 in many other publications. By any count, it should be thought of as a top-tier Christmas movie. So is it the best? That's a matter of opinion, obviously. I'm generally not a fan of propaganda flicks, but even in that, I don't think Die Hard falls into that category. McClane is sort of an anti-cop in some ways when all the other officials seem part of the system that keeps our everyman down. He is bucking that trend, right? The real question is, what do you want to watch on Christmas? And I think it's clear that by any measure, Die Hard should rightfully be in this pantheon and in the discussion of top Christmas films ever to grace the screen. So maybe it's not your style. Maybe you're in the mood for a traditional holiday romance or something made before 1970, and that is fine. Although consider that Die Hard is now as old as A Charlie Brown Christmas was when Die Hard originally came out. There's a reason to want a Christmas film that's touching. Maybe it's been a difficult year and you just want to escape. But maybe when you're ready, you'll consider escaping into a new tradition. A tradition to remember that even if this past year felt like you were walking on broken glass, you will still stand back up with your bloody feet despite the pain. You're going to stand up to the Scrooges and the greedy Mr. Potters and the terrible Hans Grubers of the world, and you're going to try to save your happiness and fight those who try to steal it and isolate you from your loved ones. George Bailey had a quaint message about greed in a world before Occupy Wall Street or this year of Luigi, right? Unlike George Bailey, we want to do more than just live again. We want to thrive. We know that these oligarchs have a gun to the back of the people that we love, and we need to take control. We need to send them a message, even if we have to write it on the gray sweatshirt of a man who has threatened our family and our peace. We now have the machine gun. Ho, ho, ho. And we're going to look them in the eye with all the fierceness of this winter storm, and we're going to shout to them, yippee-ki-yay to all, and to all a good night.